Don't call a magician when you actually need a wizard, kind of thing, right?
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Legitimate Cybersecurity podcast. I almost called
It's one of those days.
It is. I almost called it the Cyber Kill Chain podcast because guess what we're talking about today? The Cyber Kill Chain.
Yeah, we're talking about that.
So, Frank, you and I were kind of talking about this last week. Actually, I think this came in from this was a listener submission, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Probably. We've had a few listener submissions come in, and the problem is sometimes I read them and then I forget I read them, and then sometimes I come back and it's like those good idea fairies that happen, right? Where they're like, you know what we should do? We should do this. And it's like, yeah, the thing that was suggested 2 months ago. Yeah, great idea. So it's probably exactly the same thing. Someone suggested it. I forgot, and then it came back.
But yes, you are listening to the Legitimate Cybersecurity podcast. Yeah,
for now.
I am not Frank Downs, but Frank Downs is right there. I am Dustin Brewer, and I'm right here. And this, like Frank said, I think this is just how this episode's going to go because I think we're both really tired. Frank's been traveling. Frank, you went to Comic-Con.
Yeah, I did. I went to Comic-Con, and it was a lot of fun. I took the whole family, and I showed them the meaning of being completely overwhelmed by a lot of like-minded individuals. Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. I didn't know if we were going to go that far.
I think we're allowed to say that because we're nerds. We're allowed to. Yeah. We can use that term.
Absolutely. Self-identify. I self-identify as a problem and a nerd. So that's right. There we go.
It's all good. And look, like we're, as already mentioned, we're what we'd really like to focus on today is the cyber kill chain. We've seen, there's always news articles coming out, of course, about ransomware, of course, about breaches and kind of how that goes. But the cyber kill chain itself is the way of conceptualizing how these attacks are happening in somewhat of a really high level framework, right? And I mean, like really high level framework. So we'll get into this, Frank. I want to get your opinion on it, as far as, CISOs go. And of course, I'll give a little bit of what I think about it as far as like pen testing and offensive cybersecurity goes. But look, break it down real quick for everybody here. So there are 7 stages of the cyber kill chain: reconnaissance, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, command and control, and actions on objectives. These are the ways that if you're sitting there and you're trying to categorize an attack or trying to create an attack taxonomy on how something happened, these are some really high level kind of stages you can put the levels of the attack into in order to, again, convey the idea to a board, start talking about it at a higher level, or incident response. There's a lot of different things you can use this for. It was created by Lockheed Martin, I think in the early 2010s.
2011. Which is why you and I, it's why I probably don't take it seriously enough, because I feel like certain frameworks that happen while I'm actively performing said actions kind of get disregarded sometimes, in my opinion. Right. And there were frameworks beforehand that I thought were uniquely applicable, such as the Hackers Framework or the hacking methodology. I think it's more commonly known as the MITRE ATT&CK framework as well, which is, the big difference there. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd say is the perspective. The cyber threat kill chain is from the defender's perspective, and then the MITRE hacker attack framework is arguably from the perspective, same incident, same type of actions being performed, but more just from the perspective of the attacker. But the threat kill chain is so good. Yeah. 2011, Lockheed Martin decided, we'll make one too.
Right. So. And, it is funny, doing research on just the different frameworks and standards that are out there, regardless of whether we're talking about an offensive cybersecurity, offensive cyber operations, defensive cyber operations, both holistic cybersecurity. Everybody's got a different flavor. And you and I see this a lot where, we have customers and we work with organizations who use multiple, right? Like, because sometimes you do in-house software development and you're not going to be using NIST CSF for that, but you might nest, the Microsoft secure software development lifecycle into NIST CSF. In order to do what you need to do. And then you have regulations that come on top of that, right? And like it snowballs and it spirals out of control pretty quickly. There's something that's supposed to help us conceptualize things, right?
And then don't forget insurance too. Insurance requires.
And then insurance, where they have their own thing they want to do, right? And so you have all these different things that kind of go into how we like to organize information for something that's so intricate and advanced and vast, right? Real quick, let's step back and talk about what, when we talk about cybersecurity, what are we really talking about? It's very basic format. Let's say we have two computers that are connected via Wi-Fi or via some kind of networking capability. One can talk to the other. If a third party comes in there and tries to tap into it, now we have a cybersecurity issue, right? That is like the most reductive way I can explain cybersecurity and the internet, right? And so, of course, then we have to extrapolate on that and say, okay, further down the 10,000 computers that are all talking to each other, or they all can talk to each other, or maybe some of them can only talk to some of them. And then this is where this whole thing comes out. And this is where frameworks come in, right? And we like using frameworks, and it can get a little bit out of hand, of course. But when we talk about frameworks, which we do a lot, and standards, there's just it's overwhelming. It's as overwhelming as the thing that it's supposed to make not overwhelming sometimes.
Which is frustrating. And sorry, because I'm going to go on the tangent a little bit with you here too.
Yeah, please do.
On this, because I mentioned insurance earlier. And the thing that really frustrates me specifically in the world of insurance and cybersecurity is everyone needs insurance. In a lot of places, in a lot of instances, it's becoming, standard and table stakes to have cybersecurity insurance in order to do business. However, all of these different companies, instead of trying to standardize something and taking the standards that are already in existence, such as NIST or ISO along those lines, to determine if you are doing well at cyber, if you're prepared for an attack, they make up all these different questionnaires, and every company has their own questionnaire, and it's all very specific, and it's all so many pages long, and there's only like one or two people, if they're lucky, in the entire company that can answer it comprehensively in order to qualify for a policy that doesn't even necessarily protect you if said insurance company decides that part of the attack that happened involved a potential APT characteristic. And I got to tell you one thing about advanced persistent threats. They're going to use whatever tool or methodology they think is applicable at the time. And so as a result, nearly any type of attack, if an insurance company looks hard enough, will identify an APT specific characteristic and create justification not to insure you or provide you with any kind of compensation, despite you paying for that policy and jumping through your ass to fill out the entirety of that specific questionnaire that gave you the false sense of security in the first place. Sorry, I sound like one of those sovereign citizen rants right now. I'm not. I support, policies and governance and so forth, but it's really frustrating when I see a lot of clients who suffer from this type of struggle. It's almost like the U.S. healthcare system. That's completely another podcast. Another
that
show.
Is for another podcast. No, and this is how Legitimate Cybersecurity lost our insurance. So
insurance.
You were here at ground zero.
This thing is a prayer and an AI algorithm pretending that it knows who we are. So it's great.
Oh my goodness. But no, you're absolutely right. And look, we're talking specifically about, we really got off topic, but not really.
I promise we will get back to the kill chain. It'll be there and explain the part components to you.
Absolutely. And look, it's, there's limitations and there's pluses and minuses to all frameworks, all standards, all, kind of these ways that we like to, again, organize data so that we can conceptualize what's going on or try to break down a complex issue into something that's a little more digestible, right? But look, the cyber kill chain, it's not a bad thing. It's not a tool that you could use. And again, we'll get into like kind of, who can use this and why they should be using this. But one of the things that I think, there's some strengths here to the cyber kill chain specifically. And look, you mentioned, there's other, attack. MITRE is a great one to use. I think from both a defensive and offensive perspective, really, it's just a little more intricate. Some of the great things that, the kill chain can do is if you're focusing specifically on like a perimeter breach, I think it's great for that, right? If you're focusing specifically on just being able to describe an attack from a simple perspective, I think it's great for that. If you're talking about post-compromise persistence, insider threats, multi-vector attacks, then maybe you need to look into MITRE, or maybe you need to look into something else to kind of help explain that or conceptualize it. But from a CISO perspective, because I know you work with a lot of organizations as a vCISO, Frank, when trying to describe a breach or when trying to conceptualize what happens during a breach to a board or just to, C-suite or just to upper management, how do you feel about the cyber kill chain? You think that it's a useful tool, or is it something that you would use?
I think it's very useful, but not for the reason that people think.
Okay.
I mean, the reason that I like to, and I see more interest at the executive level when I reference the cyber threat kill chain versus the MITRE ATT&CK framework is that it has this word cyber threat and kill chain in it. And I'm not joking. When you say those words in combination to people, they sit up and they take notice either because they're scared or they think it sounds cooler. And a lot of when you're working with people who are unfamiliar with cybersecurity, it's not part of their day-to-day consideration, and their main focus is on making sure, the donuts get made, that operations happen. The cooler words you can use, the more likely you are to have their attention. So that's where cyber threat kill chain comes in. So we could, be pessimistic, arguably, and say it's all about marketing, but it's also about successful marketing because it really grabs the attention more. And at the end of the day, I will say the threat kill chain is just as applicable specifically because it kind of benefits from the second mover advantage, if there is such one in this case, and that it identified what was good in the MITRE, attack methodology and took that and kind of consolidated it here and there, nipped and tucked a bit here and there, but also expanded in other places as well. And to be blunt, I think there's also less steps than the hacker methodology, which is a bit more. So that's helpful when you can save time.
Right.
Because time is, valuable for leaders.
Right. We've talked about this kind of ad nauseum on the podcast before about how, once you kind of make a cyber issue sexy, it starts getting attention. And if it starts getting attention, it starts getting money.
Just like life.
Everything else. Yeah, and not to once again bring in AI into the conversation, but because it so often gets injected into the conversation, regardless of what the hell you're doing. Here we go again, where it's like, AI has been around or the AI as we know it, LLMs. Not talking about the type of AI, and I can never remember the terminology for the type of AI that actually does an action. I still consider it robotic process automation. I know that dates me, and you're like, all of a sudden it's like Dustin's an old man because he's using these old terms.
You didn't have to say that for me to think you're an old man. I'm kidding.
No, I'm not. And it is funny. I think
we make flaming Homer jokes. Like we know what the flaming Homer drink is. And yes. I can tell you that is now become an age signifier. For those of you who are not familiar, that is a reference to a very old episode of The Simpsons, which, to tie everything back in, someone attempted to make at Comic-Con, and I gratefully drank one and woke up the next day with both my lips completely puffed up like I had Botox shoved in.
That's what it was? It was the flaming Mo?
No, that was the first. It happened twice. That was the first time. I don't know what happened. What made I also woke up with my entire face completely puffed up. Maybe it has nothing to do with the flaming Homer, but yeah.
Oh no. It's funny that you bring up The Simpsons as like a way of aging yourself because it's been on for almost 40 years now,
1989.
Yeah. So good Lord. And so I don't think, it takes a while for The Simpsons to catch up with you. I think in the field of cybersecurity, like it just feels like it's exponentially like you get outdated quicker. You feel older quicker. And it's funny because I talk to my team all the time and I'm like, yeah, I'm like an old man of cyber. And they're like, we're older than you, Dustin. And I'm like, I understand. But I've just been doing this for so freaking long that it's like, like I say things like, oh, the MITRE attack surface, MITRE attack is better than the NIST 800-115. Everybody's like, what 800-115? Wasn't that defunct back in 2010 or something? And I'm like, yeah, maybe.
We're part of the small group that knows Wi-Fi included 900 megahertz at one point in the actual frequencies.
In the early day. And look, you and I were talking about this before we started recording too, which is like the kind of like, the weird thing that happens specifically with Wi-Fi where, you've got the IEEE identifications for the different technologies and different standards, right? So you've got IEEE 802.11, ABC or ABG and AC, all that kind of stuff.
AX.
And then there's the Wi-Fi Alliance, and they're totally different and call things totally like, well, then it's Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 7. Really, they just have these different identifications for things. And I do feel like sometimes when we talk about frameworks and standards, and it depends on depends on what entity you're coming from is what you're talking about. And we see people get hung up on this all the time with things like, well, I follow NIST CSF or I follow ISO 27001. Or whatever it is, right? And it's like those things map to each other so well sometimes, depending. And it's kind of the same with the cyber kill chain, where it maps so well to to things that we're already using. Like it maps well to MITRE. It's not as granular. If you want to get more granular, then use MITRE. or use, 800, 115, or use, something along those lines. But, and look, you can argue that those are used for different things too. Like one's used for categorizing the type of attack, or, breaking down the type of attack that happened. Or you can say that, well, this is also useful for pen testing if we want to see, where we're susceptible to things, or from an attacker perspective, if you're doing cyber operations or something like that, then you can look at it from there as well.
And one of the things I think it does well is that it takes those categories and contains them, as you said, they do a really good job of describing them real quick, because I know we might have one or two listeners who might not, we went over them briefly, but might not know what the actual framework, what those levels are, the different processes. When we talk about reconnaissance, for example, that's the first thing that you do. And this happens in both frameworks as well, but that's when you use, you can be either open source tools or other capabilities. You can probe a specific victim or, end client to identify specific holes that may exist. And this can be in their cyber strategy. This can be anything from, your scan can identify an outdated router. Maybe it's, a couple of different images old, or you can identify key email addresses through Google searches of individuals, or you can identify any number of things. Oh, my favorite is when you identify, because they're rarely updated appropriately, video cameras, online IP cams. And I say that specifically because they're almost like printers at this point with their level of vulnerability. I mean, Foscam, great company, right? But they do not push out enough updates regularly. And as a result, there's just some things that are just so old and outdated, you can take advantage of those. And also, that's cool because you can see stuff that's happening. But you identify this in the reconnaissance phase before you then go into weaponization and decide what tool you're going to use. You're going to try and use in order to gain access to the company. This is the second phase of things in the cyber threat kill chain. And identifying there's a couple different ways to go about weaponization. There's spray and pray, right? Where you throw every different type of tool at the target, or there is refined targeting. And that's usually, okay, I know that they have this specific vulnerability and it is they're specifically susceptible to this type of tool that I'm going to try and use, which then leads into the delivery process. The delivery process is when you actually try to use said tool to gain access and get that initial hook, which leads into the exploitation. The next phase, that's called exploitation. So we had the delivery phase and then the exploitation. In exploitation, you're using the tool and the payload that you've made to actually exploit the system initially. This initial exploitation might be everything you're going for. It might also just be the first step in where you want to go before you move laterally or something along those lines. But that's when you are installing it. This then leads into the installation of malware, right? Which is the next stage, installation. We're installing the malware. You're installing the back doors so you can gain access later to a specific system. And then, which then leads into the command and control, where you have your main area of your main channel that you use to control all the other things you're doing in the network, to then run your attack operation, which is then the actions that you're doing in the next phase called actions on objective, I think. And then that's when you're performing the actual hacking, and that you're stealing stuff, you're breaking things, you're moving stuff around, you're gaining greater access through your lateral jumps and so forth. Sorry, I just want to make sure we sum that up at some point when we call it that on this this episode between Comic-Con and our rants on insurance. And so I'll bring that in. But I mean, Dustin, I'd like your opinion on this specifically, because, it's been a while since I've actually, performed from top to bottom an attack. I know that you're working on a lot of this on a daily basis. From your perspective, what are you currently seeing as what's the hardest part of running the whole cyber threat kill chain when you're performing a penetration test or someone on your team is?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And we recently had an entire episode on penetration testing and like how to scope and what to expect. If you haven't listened to that, by the way, go back and listen to it right now, because it's a really great, it's
a really good one. I like it.
Yeah, we
actually liked it. We
got some good feedback. Yeah, we got some good feedback on it. And so, and look, if you're an organization and you're looking for a pen test and you're not quite sure, it's your first one or you haven't done one in a while, go and listen to that episode. It's a great episode, and we kind of cover a lot of bases. But on that note, one of the things we talked about was how attackers, APTs are not. right? Sure. Like we were at a conference one time, Frank, and we heard, I wish I could remember the gentleman's name, but he got up there and talked about how people overuse the word APT too much. And you kind of alluded to that earlier when talking about insurance. No, we have the attackers that are going to be getting into your network or can get into your network have, I don't want to say unlimited time and unlimited resources, but it's not really limited. It's kind of like they can spend a little bit of time on this. They can spend a little time on another operation they might have going on. This can last for months. This can last for years, right? And so, one of the things about the cyber kill chain is it does kind of bring that into view here when we talk about things like actions on objectives, the iterative process of what this is and how an attacker can gain access and then further that access, right? So actions on objectives could be that they're going back to square one and they're starting from reconnaissance because they got a foothold in your network, but it's not the area that they want to get into. So then what do? They'll hang out in that area of your network for months, weeks, months. Like it's, right. And they'll do what they need to do, run man in the middle attacks, run DDoS attacks to try to get you, DOS attacks to try to get you to reboot something to see if there's some kind of thing that they can take care of there. All things that we're not necessarily going to do during a penetration test, right? Like we're not in the business of knocking people offline. We're not in the business of knocking our servers offline. We'll tell you if there's something on there that might, but we're not necessarily going to do that, right? And so, then your walkthrough was perfect, by the way. Thank you. Thank you for doing that.
Thanks. Every now and then I actually have to teach it at night.
It's almost like you're a cybersecurity professional that knows what they're doing. So cheers.
Yeah. I have been called Professor Downs, but it's by my students and they're just being nice because they want good grades.
Well, I'll call you it now. Professor Downs, that was an excellent.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, there is one weird part about that teaching, grad school. I'd say, okay, so and I haven't really pegged it out. I have a few theories here, but there's always that 10% that doesn't call you professor or anything like that. They're just like, hey, Frank, here's this. And I'm like, hey, now I know some professors that would be like, I'm sorry, it's Professor such and such, or it's Doctor such and such. I'm just like, but when I approach my grad class and so forth, I'm like, we're all here after work late. And you guys are doing the same thing I did because it's the same program I went through. I'm like, you're paying money to be here late after work, tired to learn. I mean, they can call me like Zoidberg for all they want, as long as I actually care, right? And try. But I'm trying to figure out what differentiates the students, but that, are between professor and which ones just call me by my first name. And half the time, and I think I figured it out, Dustin, I have all my work, all my UMBC email forwarded to my personal email. And I think I accidentally respond from my personal email half the time. It just says Frank Downs. And they're like, it's Frank. Yeah, Frank. Hey, Frank. Something like that. But now it'll just be their AI will read it and respond how they think they should respond. And I'll just be talking to an AI, and sooner or later we'll all just be doing that.
Well, AI is so kind, though. It'll probably call you professor. It'll call you professor doctor.
AI is okay. I don't know if anyone's seen, first of all, I want to address your statement directly. AI, very kind. But also, it's incentivized to be kind. It wants you to come back.
Yes.
Which gets back to our discussion that we had a while back about AI girlfriends. No kidding. The AI is nice to you and listens to you and just is always asking about you. Because first, it's, first of all, I hope you find someone who's a real human that wants to actually cares about you that much, that wants to hear from you. But second of all, it's not a person. It's incentivized to make you feel listened to and heard all of the time, right? That's why it's so polite, because you can be completely mean to it and it'll always reply politely if you want to. And because it's also incentivized to reply politely, because then you'll keep paying and then you'll keep coming back and giving it, just shaving off pieces of your soul into it. So it's, my point there being.
Yes.
The new episode of South Park was phenomenal.
But here we are talking about the cyber kill chain. But yeah, absolutely. There's so many more things that bad guys have access to, right? And so much more time and so much more resources. And I do see there's a fatigue that's happening for sure within the cybersecurity industry where it's like, I don't want to say it's a losing battle. Austin, when we talked to Austin, he kind of alluded to this where, for a while there, the game of cops and robbers is constantly going on. Bad guys come up with new tactics. Cops come up with ways to catch those tactics. Cops come up with new technology to catch the bad guys before it happens, or during it happening. Bad guys find a way to circumvent that, and the cycle continues. And when it comes to cybercrime and cybersecurity, it's not any different. It's the same. It's the same exact cycle. For a while there, we were getting ahead. because we were funding things like research and funding cybersecurity innovations. Now with the current administration, and at least in the United States, that's not really happening. We're pulling back on funding. We're doing all, as Austin alluded to, it's we don't know what's going to happen. We might start falling behind again. There are some interesting concepts out there, like, basically like, we'll stop fighting, stop fighting back when it comes to cybersecurity. And that's an interesting concept. And I've seen it before, and I get it. It's this concept that, like, well, we don't need to go to war with anybody, and we don't need to, we don't need to police anybody. To an extent, that's very, to me, it's very utopian. I get it. And I think those are good ideas, but at the same time, we don't have the resources. We're not currently, it's you and I talking about, Star Trek the other day, and how, with Star Trek, they're so advanced as a society that, like, oh, we don't have crime anymore, and we don't have, this and that and the other thing. And it's like, yeah, but that's like 2,300. So we have 300 more years to go in our evolution to, like,
we got a lot. And it was, yeah, it's great, but it was a lot of pain to get here. Yeah, I agree with you. You're right. It's 300 years away, and 300 years through, if you're a Foundation fan, through the dark age of, of the future. Another good show if anyone's ever interested in the it's like the ancient future aesthetic. Sorry, continue.
No, but then the Borg come, and now all of a sudden we're back into war again. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like you're always going to kind of have these things kind of hit you. And so again, cyber kill brings back. So, like, when we talk about the ability to fight back, things like the cyber kill chain can help. They can help in, finding out what happened, right? And we do this a lot too, Frank. We do TTXs, we do tabletop exercises, we do incident response review, and things like this, which you have. In any good incident response plan, you're going to have hot washes afterwards, right? You're going to have a review of an attack that happened. And if this is the thing that you need to use in order to digest that and make changes and improve your incident response for next time, then great, then use it, and it's great. Then I don't see any issues with it.
And well, I like that you bring that up. What stage, from your perspective, do you think defenders have a best chance of interrupting in the whole cyber threat kill chain? Like, if something's happening, what stage do you think that defenders are best at preventing or stopping or interfering with an incident?
Yeah, really good question. I think the weaponization area, right? Really? So you can have a vulnerability, whether that vulnerability can be exploited or weaponized, or, you can have, the one person in HR that continually clicks on the links during the phishing test, right? But if you have, the right protective technologies or the right checks and balances within your policies and procedures, the weaponization of those vulnerabilities is a lot harder. And look, a lot of bad guys are going to move on to where the lower hanging fruit is. And if that's not your organization, then guess what? Great job. You just avoided an attack because you were able to mitigate the weaponization of the vulnerabilities.
I like that answer, because and it makes
you're wrong, Dustin.
No. It makes me, well, because I want to know your thoughts on this. I like that answer because then it brings to mind honeypots.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are not aware, in the parlance of cyber, a honeypot is a intentionally vulnerable or accessible system that defenders put in their network or outside the network or somewhere within the network, their scope of responsibility, to attract hackers or attackers in an effort to misdirect them, right? So if you leave something that's, especially vulnerable out, the idea there being that, okay, since attackers like the lower hanging fruit, they're going to go after that and leave you alone. What I have seen, Dustin, and I want your perspective on this, from with a lot of the organizations I work with, they don't use honeypots as much as they used to, or that I would think you should. Personally, I'm all about putting honeypots out there. I'm all about putting poisoned honeypots out there. In that case, that's in a honeypot that if someone accesses, it then actually hurts them back, kind of thing. The mentality there being that, well, you're the one who's committing crime and jumping onto my network and attacking. It's like leaving the one door unlocked at your house, and when the person walks through, there's an Indiana Jones style stake pit at the bottom. Are you going to blame the person who walked in the house or the person who, put in the stake pit? No, that's his house. Their house. You shouldn't be going into people's houses, right? And then just, sinking in. But why do you think we don't see one, as many honeypots as we used to? And two, do you think we could ever see them come back? Or three, are they using them the same amount and I'm just not seeing them with my clients?
Yeah, this has come up with some of my clients as well. And this comes up on my team a lot where we're like, wow, we could really collect a lot of really great data if we set up some honeypots and started and some threat intel stuff that we could really start collecting. And look, there are some organizations out there. Zscaler has like a honeypot style offering. There's a couple of other vendors out there that do something similar. I think it all comes down to, look, we're still, number one, we're still in this very reactive stage within cybersecurity's evolution. We're kind of putting out fires. The proactivity is coming, and you and I see it on a regular basis with most of our customers, but the proactivity is coming, and it's something that we're starting to get a handle on and starting to realize that if you have a good proactive practices, then you're less likely to have to worry about putting out fires because you'll have less fires, right? And then the second part to this is what I mentioned before, which is the cyber fatigue that's happening. Like, you're so busy putting out those fires and then also being proactive. We're just starting to see that kind of proactivity come back into play. The things like honeypots that were something of a proactive thing are now, they're out of vogue and they're starting to come back a little bit. But
I'd love for them to come back. I love honeypots.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that there are definitely services out there that do this still. It's not as prevalent. There's so much other stuff going on within a network infrastructure for an organization that, again, I just think that they don't have time to go and look at a honeypot because the honeypot is their production network that they're currently. Right. So they're like,
right. Oh, well, because the honeypot is their actual systems.
Yeah, this just happened on prod, right? And look, we've talked about security through obscurity before. This is something akin to that, right? Where it's like misdirection. It's a magician's trick. But at the same time, now
magicians are really cool, though, well, depending who you ask.
But things like honeypots. Now that we have the capability with machine learning to kind of go in there and do a little bit of triage for us, that's great. You're right? Then why aren't we now deploying more honeypots, doing stuff, and then, having machine learning go and do the tedious task of like, here's how the bad guy tried to get in, and we've seen it before, and I'm going to put this to the MITRE framework or put it to the cyber kill chain framework and show you what happened here. And then this is what you need to look out for, right? And then, of course, we have our ISACs that are around that you could then take it to an ISAC and say, hey, guys, just so you know, I'm a manufacturing organization. Just so you know, here's what we're starting to see on our honeypots. And we need to start looking out for these types of attacks, right? And I love ISACs for that, by the way. Like, we don't talk about, maybe we need to do an episode on ISACs. Yeah.
I think we even know a few members that we could invite on, which would be great.
Yeah.
I like, man, you've given me something to think about for a while there, calling honeypots like a magician's trick, a magic trick, like something a magician would use. Because it's kind of like a parlor trick to an extent that you don't want to be solely reliant on it, but it is a cool thing to have. It's like, okay, don't call a magician when you actually need a wizard, kind of thing, right? Which, like, 3 people might get that reference. I understand what I'm trying to say there. It's like, yeah, because if you need something fixed and it's pretty bad, it'd be cool. Magicians are invited, but at the end of the day, magicians are just like pulling rabbits out of hat, and they're like, look at these cards. Like, if there's like a big fire in a town in Hobbitville or whatever, you don't just want to call like David Copperfield and be like, this looks pretty bad. Watch as I create an illusion with these like mirrors that make it not look like it's here. No, you can call Gandalf, who'll be like, achoo, oh, and now it's out, right? So it's like, okay, come on over, magicians. You can do the party tricks while the wizards do their thing, cyber. So there you go. That's where I was going with that. With honeypots, it's nice to have, and they can be a helpful part, but you shouldn't be over reliant on them at all. You should have a comprehensive implementation of cybersecurity strategy through wizards.
Yeah.
Anyway. There you go.
And what you were quoting was the Prestige, a Michael Caine quote, right? Where he's talking about Tesla.
Real?
Yeah. He's talking about Tesla.
Nice.
He's like, oh, is he a magician? He's like, no, he's a wizard. He's like, there's a difference.
I could quote Michael Caine. Man, I feel like you just gave me a compliment. I'll quote Michael Caine all day long.
This is why we work so well together, Frank, is like, I'm in your head. I know.
Dude, you and my wife, you and Kat are like the 2 people who actually understand some of the crazy, insane litany of misconnected words that come out, and you're like, oh, what he actually means is you all should go watch that movie, The Prestige.
Yes, absolutely.
Please watch movies. I'm gonna watch that tonight.
If you're listening to this podcast right now, just stop listening right now and go watch The Prestige. It's going to be way more in the next 5 minutes.
That was Christopher Nolan too, if I remember correctly, right? He was the director. One of his better pieces. It's not like Tenet where he insists you watch it 5 times and then have subtitles on to actually understand maybe what happened in that movie. It's actually, understandable the first time. So,
but
I'm a big Christopher Nolan fan.
And to bring this, and by the way, I just realized that this totally looks like I'm drinking like whiskey or something. This is not whiskey.
That's what I would say too. If it was whiskey, I'd be like, this is great apple juice.
I'd be slurring my speech a lot more if this were whiskey.
Yeah, I know, because that would be a lot. Wait, what is it? Is it juice?
No, actually, you know what? It is it's an energy drink, and actually, it might be vodka because this provider for this energy drink just recently came out and said that they accidentally sent out a bunch. So if I do start slurring, I promise it's not whiskey, it's vodka. But I didn't know it was vodka at the time, so it's okay.
Exactly.
All right. Anyway, so look, and to bring it back, like the magician part of a honeypot is that it's the redirection. The wizard part is then looking at the data that's happening on that and being able to mitigate an attack because you were able to discover it on your honeypot to begin with, right?
Which, for those listening, Dustin just gave you the secret to becoming a wizard there. It's first magician, then study your results to become a true wizard. This is why there's no wizarding school outside of the one. Wait, I think there's one in Harry Potter, but if you want to be a real wizard, is one our point there. That's how you become one.
If you want to be a real wizard, then you jump into Wireshark and you study packets for a very, very long time.
True.
And that's how
it hurts, but it's worth it. I promise.
It does hurt. And look, until quantum comes out, that's how all this is going to work for a really long time. And look, yes, AI makes things better. It makes things easier. LLMs can do some really great analysis. You still should know how to do your own analysis, and you still should know how to do. Yes. When you look at a packet, you look at the ones and zeros there, and you're seeing the hex, and you're seeing, I'm not saying you need to be able to read binary or even hex for that matter, but a breakdown in Wireshark, you should be able to read that and understand what's going on in a single packet.
And for all you aspiring people who are in Wireshark, who are listening to us, never forget, Control Right opens everything up the first time for you, and you don't have to open each of the stuff. Sorry, some of us live in a world of chaos, whereas then you have Dustin who's like, no, we open each part one at a time to make sure we have a nice organized stuff. I'm not old Frank. Bam! Yeah, there you go. Never forget.
Not old Frank, who taught Wireshark, by the way, back in the day. So came up with one of the most comprehensive Wireshark courses that certain agencies had ever seen at that point. So
thanks.
Let's
thanks,
just go
pal. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I told it on accident on top of it. So there you go.
But and look, like we dove deep here. We went deeper than the cyber kill chain. What were we talking about? The cyber kill chain. Than the cyber kill chain that needs to go. And bringing it back here, if you're a practitioner, you should be diving in a little bit deeper, probably using something like MITRE. But then being able to convey that information that you're looking at from Wireshark and maybe using MITRE to digest, you need to be able to bring it up to a higher level sometimes. And if you can do that, then guess what? You're going to be C-suite's best friend. And if you're C-suite's best friend, then maybe you'll be asked to join the team sometime or the group.
Which means if you're a millennial, someday you might be able to afford a house. There you go.
That's right. A millennial.
Gen Z, you'll have the best rent in town.
Yep. Oh God. Here we go. Wow. We're getting canceled for like 4 different things this time. Interesting.
If you cancel me for any of the things I've said on this within the next 10 years, give me a buffer. I don't know what after 10 years is. Then I don't think we would have gotten along in real life anyway. Also, I reserve the right, as all functional people should, to change my mind based upon additional data as it comes in. So not just comes in, but that I'm made aware of.
I believe they called that a few decades ago flip-flopping.
They call it flip-flopping now, man. If you get contradictory data to what you believe, then you better not change your belief. You tell them that data is wrong. You tell them that data is wrong, and then you're just asking questions. You're just asking questions. How did you get this data? Oh, do you really trust that institution? How do we know ghosts weren't influencing the data in that institution? There's no proof ghosts don't haunt NIST. It's just tired. I'm jet lagged.
I was going to let you keep going. That was great. I love that. You better make a short out of that one.
We'll find out. I give it for everyone. First, if you're watching our shorts, thank you. I appreciate it. Second of all, it's made by AI helps us cut those up. I don't know where the humor is half the time. I just exist in a state of, some would say, hilarity or mockery, depending on, it's like the cyber threat kill chain. I think I'm funny. I think they're laughing at me, but then from a different perspective, it's the hacking MITRE perspective, and they go, no, we're mocking you from our perspective. It's all very subjective.
That's right. It goes into their individual echo chambers, and then they
Right, but
whatever they want to say
that are managed by AI. But thank you. My point being, thanks for watching our show.
Yeah. Thanks for watching our shorts, and thanks for watching our show. I think that's a good place to wrap this up.
It is.
Hey, everybody, don't forget.
Post them in the comments. We read all the comments. If you have any questions on this, post them in the comments. We read them. We answer them. Especially if they're actually about the cyber threat kill chain, we'll answer them because maybe you got a little lost in some of the sauce here. But sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead, Dustin.
No. I was just going to say, don't forget that we've also been nominated for, I think we've been nominated. Look, we're on a list somewhere for a podcast.
We're definitely on lists.
Yeah, we're on lots of lists, but we're also on a list for a podcast award. And if you really like this podcast, we'd appreciate a vote in our names. I understand it. I think if you go there, you have to sign up for an account, which sucks. Sorry about that.
Yeah, you can actually vote, and if you don't register after you vote, then the vote doesn't count, which I feel is very backwards. But, I am not one to criticize said implementation based upon all the voting you can do on our show. Wait, you can't. I'm going to put a poll in the comments. Yeah, there we go. What's your favorite, the phase of the cyber threat kill chain?
I like it. Let's do it.
There you go.
Actionable things. But everybody, thank you so much for listening in this week. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have any recommendations for future shows, please put them in the comments. We do read them. And this episode is an example of that, even though I'm so sorry to whoever suggested it, because I feel like we went on several tangents and we didn't really get to focus on
talk about it. But we
did talk about it. That's very true. So please, we do read your guys' comments. We really appreciate the feedback. And thanks for listening in.
All right. Have a good one. Talk to you later.